was a man of God, a missionary who went from Europe to Africa to preach the gospel. And thousands were blessed through his ministry. But unfortunately, he contracted some virus. And he was lying in his house on the deathbed. There was a big hut and he was inside there. The local doctors treated him. But everybody gave up hope because the fever was rising and rising. And the doctors knew this kind of case will never be all right. Once the fever crosses a certain level, that person is gone. And the doctor came out of the hut and told all the people there, the missionary is going to die in few minutes. In just few hours, missionary will die. So friends of the missionary gathered there. The local people gathered outside the hut. And they're all sitting outside, waiting for the missionary to die, so that they could perform their rituals. And this missionary couldn't even pray. Just few hours to live. The fever was rising high and high, just like some of our dear ones who are suffering in ICU. The oxygen is reducing in their bodies. The virus is increasing. That was the case of this missionary. But all of a sudden, in Europe, some people had burden to pray for this missionary. They were led by the Spirit to pray for this missionary. And they began to pray, Lord, spare this man's life. Lord, let this man's life be precious in your eyes. And they began to cry, they began to pray. And the appointed time came here for this missionary to die. The fever came right so high, and this man was about to die. Suddenly the voice of God came. And the missionary heard God speaking. And God spoke to that virus and said, thus far and no further. Thus far and no further. The fever stopped there. The virus stopped. And after some time, the fever came down. Slowly, the fever came down. Within few hours, the missionary was totally normal. He got up from his bed. He walked outside the hut. The people who were waiting outside were shocked. They saw him. They said, what happened? How did all this happen? The missionary said, God said, thus far and no further. And the virus stopped. Let us plead with God. Lord, thus far and no further. Enough of this pandemic, Lord, in India. Enough of this pandemic in different nations. Thus far and no further, Lord.